right, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Hey, so have you ever heard this phrase that if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough? So what you're going to hear from some of these folks are the dreams that they have and how they are disrupting the future of education and the future of how we work going forward, how we consult going forward. I'm 47 years old. I came to this country when I was 15 years old. I think Arnav is 15. They're both 17. And what you're about to hear, I guarantee you, is going to blow your mind. So, Aryan, you're up first. He's going to talk for 5 minutes. Then we're going to have Ella, then we're going to have Arnav, and then we're going to sit down and have a quick chat. So give them a huge round of applause.
Are we up? Okay. I'm really excited to be here. I flew in from India a few days ago, and it's like to meet all of these amazing people. And I'm here to talk a bit about my work. So first off, I'm a builder. I've built a bunch of different things in the past. I've built a small SaaS company using OpenAI's tech. Last year, I was selected by Eric Schmidt's foundation for some of the work that I did using machine learning for COVID diagnosis. And right now, since the past couple of months, I've been working in Web3. And I'm here to talk about an interesting problem that I feel a lot about, and it's about making Web3 dynamic. And I'm going to talk you through why I think this problem is important and why this is going to unlock the next set of use cases for the blockchain. So when I started out in this space, the two things that caught my attention was trustless operations and reliable executions. For the first time in the history of writing software, we can write code that's running on a network and not a server, and it can still run reliably without a central authority governing it. But it's still early in its evolution, because the way the internet started with read-only websites where you ping a server, something happens, the server shuts down. And then it moved into this dynamic state where every service is talking to everything else. They're all working together to make the whole network more productive and more powerful. In Web3, we are still in the static phase, where you have contracts on the blockchain. You call the contract, they do something, and then they shut down. The contract doesn't have context about what's happening on another blockchain, what's happening outside of the blockchain, and what's happening on other contracts. And the simplest analogy that I give to understand what dynamic Web3 is this simple thing called if this, then that. And if you've used the Zapiers and IFTTTs of the world, you know what I mean by this. But executing this simple trigger action pair on the blockchain is computationally impossible because the blockchain is an isolated environment. The contract that's running on the blockchain doesn't have any idea what's happening outside. And if we have to build further use cases of these contracts and expand more utility, we need to build out these dynamic functionalities of the blockchain. And the two ways you can do that is by building out data reliability infrastructure and building event sharing. And I'm going to talk a bit about what I mean by this. So any decision that the smart contract has to make to execute a trigger action pair, let's just walk through an example. You have a smart contract where you want to buy Bitcoin every time the price goes below $15,000. Now, the trigger that's going to tell you to buy the Bitcoin when the price is below $15,000 needs to be reliable, because at times these contracts are governing billions of dollars in value, and a wrong trigger can be extremely expensive, and it can cost you a lot of money. So the first part of solving this problem is how do we build a network of nodes so that every time a contract is receiving a trigger to execute this trigger action, if this, then that pair, it's coming from multiple people and not just one pair, so that you know when the data is coming to you in the contract that it's trustable, it's reliable. The second part of it is event-based execution. And if any of you have built websites or apps before, you can integrate Google Analytics, Mixpanel, Amplitude, any of these data providers, and you can get reports for every click, drag, swipe that's happening on your website or app. But that's not possible on the blockchain. It's either extremely expensive or it's impossible to share an event that's happening on one contract with everybody else on the blockchain. And to complete this if, this, and that pair, we need to combine both of these things together, which is building extremely reliable data sources and combining them with an event sharing mechanism that multiple contracts can use. And right now, I'm giving you a brief overview of the problem, some context about why it is important and how it's going to help unlock a few use cases. And as I mentioned before, I've been working on this for the past couple of months. And I'm going to show you a quick preview about what I'm building. So I'm building RAID, which is an automation protocol that helps you execute these if, this, and that pairs on the blockchain. And it's pretty much used across multiple use cases. You can use it for DeFi, you can use it for DAOs, you can use it for any on-chain action. And this right here is a 7-line code snippet. In this, the trigger is monitoring gas prices, and every time the gas price hits below a certain number, the transaction is executed. And this is running exactly how I explained. It's running on a network of nodes, so the data is reliable. And it's sharing the event of the trigger across multiple contracts to execute the transaction. And all of this is happening in 7 lines of code, which is the target. So I'm excited to continue working on this problem. I'm really passionate about this industry because it's a new way to write and run code, and it's going to unlock a lot of new use cases in the future. And if you feel for this problem, if you're a builder, developer, founder in this space, we should talk. And I'm excited to meet all of you. Thank you.
Good job. See, I told you, you crushed it. He just flew in from Mumbai, India, by himself. He's 17 years old. He's already interned at which companies?
Called Spry.
What's it called?
Spry.
SPAC. And he was the founding member of some of those companies. He just talked to you about Web3 and blockchain that he's building. We invited him here so that he can give you, this incredible speech. So thank you, Aryan. It's amazing. I know you're jet lagged, but the way you just delivered the message, it's incredible. So my 15, I guess now, 11-year-old and my 17-year-old daughter went through this program. So I'm such a huge champion of these programs, and we're going to talk about how all of you should be learning the same way these people are learning. So if you don't know about Web3, how is it possible that a 17-year-old should know more about Web3 than you? So I'm actually learning from them on a regular basis. I'm actually also learning from my 11 and 17-year-old. OK, Ella, you're up next. You have your slides. You're going to tell us how you decided to not do ballet dancing anymore and decide to do this. And hopefully you still do ballet a little bit, too.
Exactly. I'll do a little move for you. Yeah, hey, everyone. My name's Ella. I'm super excited to be here today. I'm 17 years old from just outside of Toronto and going to be talking about quantum computing. So like many other curious individuals in this industry, I started with the famous thought experiment Schrodinger's cat, which I'm sure many of you have heard some version of before. Well, for those unfamiliar, the idea was this. Place a cat in a sealed box with a device that has a 50% chance of killing this cat within the next hour. I know, it's quite morbid, but the idea here is, at the end of the hour, what's the state of that cat? Well, common sense suggests that the cat must be either dead or alive. But quantum physics says that the cat state is rather a probability of being either dead or alive. It's a hybrid of the two, if you will. Now, if this sounds absurd, you're getting it. And Schrodinger actually developed this thought experiment to prove the ridiculousness of such a theory. And it was Nobel laureate Richard Feynman that once said, if you think you understand quantum physics, then you don't. So while Schrodinger's feline paradox is, for the most part, a misinterpreted analogy for the macroscopic world, it serves to demonstrate one key pillar in quantum physics, which is quantum systems are well-described sets of probabilistic outcomes. And it's the act of measurement, in this case observation, that reveals one and only one definitive state. This is coined as the term superposition. Classical computers, as I'm sure many of you know, manipulate bits, which can be in the state of 0 or 1 to represent data. But quantum computers use qubits, which can be in the state of 0, 1, or a relative probability of the two. Quantum computers also harness quantum interference, which is actually a byproduct of superposition that allows us to bias the measurement of qubits towards a desired state or set of states. They also use quantum entanglement, which essentially creates a correlated qubit daisy chain to cut back on running time and computing power. And because of all this and so much more, qubits can take on 2 to the n bits. So while 13 qubits requires 1 kilobyte of RAM, 13 bits requires a mere byte and a half. So to fully visualize this, in 2019, one of Google's quantum computers performed a calculation in less than 4 minutes, which would require the world's fastest supercomputer 10,000 years to compute. And this inherent limitation to classical devices is especially prevalent in the world of chemistry, as simulating a single molecule of caffeine with total accuracy would require a supercomputer 1 to 10% the size of the Earth. So I began my journey in the field of quantum chemistry with a flagship quantum machine learning algorithm known as the Variational Quantum Eigensolver, or VQE for short. It's a hybrid quantum classical algorithm that allows us to optimize for a molecule's ground state energy. And the process begins with a Hamiltonian, which, as represented by a matrix of numbers, is simply an operator that encapsulates the total energy of a given system. And its eigenvalues, which, for the sake of simplicity, can just be thought of as scalar values correlated to this matrix, represent the possible energies of individual quantities. So remember, Hamiltonian, matrix, eigenvalue, number. The variational principle states that for any given Hamiltonian representing matrix, the expectation value must always be greater than or equal to the lowest possible eigenvalue. So this means that by repeatedly measuring the expectation value, we will eventually yield the quantity we want, which is the lowest possible eigenvalue. We prepare a circuit using an ansatz, which is essentially just a good guess as to what the eigenvalue might be. And once we perform measurements on the qubits, we get an estimate of how well these parameters performed. And then we iterate until the results converge, and we yield the lower bounded eigenvalue for this Hamiltonian, which is the ground state energy for the molecule. So while determining molecular energies might seem pretty trivial to the untrained eye, it's these very insights that allow us to map incredibly complex electron configurations. And it's these configurations that underlie all reactions, equilibrium geometries, and transition interactions, so the foundation of chemistry entirely. But quantum computing does not end in the world of atoms. Financial analysts can harness quantum computers to parse through data more quickly, to run better forecasting models, more accurately weigh risk-benefit optimization. And it actually poses a threat in the field of cybersecurity, thanks to Peter Shor, who developed an algorithm that can factor incredibly large numbers, which is the foundation of much of our modern encryption today. Many companies are actually developing a counter to this threat called post-quantum cryptography that seeks to develop methods that would hopefully be more resilient to quantum power. Now, where I see quantum to be the most applicable is in the area of healthcare. It can be used for 3D protein identification and target identification. It can be used for genomic analyses, optimizing dose and solubility levels, even improving the vaccine supply chain, edge detection of medical imaging. It's crazy. The possibilities are absolutely endless. So while we're still ways away from overcoming the noisiness threshold that quantum hardware can withstand, I am particularly eager to involve myself at the intersection of quantum hardware and renewable energy systems. So whether it's aiding in catalyst development for clean energy projects, enabling a deeper understanding of the enzymes that underlie photosynthesis, or aiding in the development of new superconductors for solar cells, the possibilities in this industry are both endless and inspiring. Thank you.
Good job, Ella. All right, so Ella just gave you a school lesson on quantum computing. How many of you know as much as Ella about quantum computing? Raise your hand. Yes, so I got one guy. Are you part of TKS as well? There you go. That's the reason. I don't know that much. All right, so now we're going to shuffle things around a little bit and get to, they're both 17 years old. Okay? And they just taught you a lesson around what metaverse, Web3, and quantum computing is. Now we're going to go to 15 years old, and then we'll have our, Arnav, who's going to give us a great talk. Arnav, you ready? This is yours.
Cool. All right. So my name is Arnav. I'm 15 years old, and I'm an AI researcher currently focusing on graph machine learning. Previously, I was the youngest software developer intern in the world at IBM, and I'm the winner of the Dragon's Vault Legacy Award, which gave me $1 million to continue my research towards AGI. Today, I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the research I've been doing in collaboration with some mentors at OpenAI on transformers for graph representation learning and its implications. So transformers have been one of the most important architectural breakthroughs of the past couple of years in AI. Due to its global receptive field properties, it's an easy choice for companies to use when designing large language models, such as GPT-3 or DALL-E, because it can attend to any information that has been previously represented when doing new prediction, which means that as you scale upwards, your models will only improve, and there's no computational cost to doing this. Can I go next slide, please? Oh, oops. Hold on. However, transformers still have one major breakthrough or bottleneck, which is that they are fundamentally sequence models, which means that incorporating high-dimensional structural information into them is still a massive challenge, and especially graph data, which is an extremely important fundamental data structure for solving all kinds of problems, is still a really, really hard task. So we've gone through three sort of centrality or different encodings that we can use to implement is a full-scale solution in terms of using transformers for graph representation learning. The first is centrality encoding, which is essentially measuring how important any given node is to the entire graph in general. We do this by computing an embedding for each node that has its in degree and out degree, and we simply add that to the node features. This means that more attention is paid to nodes that have more connections with it. So for example, celebrities on social media. the next thing that we do is have spatial encoding, which is kind of the loose analogy for positional encoding, which you may be more familiar with in a vanilla transformer. And we do this by simply adding a bias term with respect to a function that measures spatial relations between two nodes. The thing that's used in this paper, I believe, is just a simple shortest path distance algorithm, but it actually has a lot of power. Because let's say, for example, that the function is found to be decreasing. That way, our model will look for nodes that are closer to the one in question, since they have shortest paths. Finally, to make use of edge data and edge information inside of our model, we introduce edge encoding, which computes the average of the dot products of the edge features on the shortest paths with a learnable weight embedding that we train over time in the graph. So this sort of simple incarnation of a full-form transformer for graph representation learning has already been used to win the Open Catalyst Challenge, which was a challenge hosted by Facebook AI Research and Carnegie Mellon University in the 2021 Europe's track. This was extremely important in the breakthrough and a super huge introduction to the sort of theoretical motivations of this power, because in this particular model, we were using graphs to figure out catalysts that could separate oxygen and hydrogen as efficiently as possible to be used in the catalytic reactions inside of batteries. In the research that we're doing with OpenAI, we're using a Stanford molecular HIV dataset to find features that most inhibit HIV. And the idea is that if we can make a model powerful enough, we can just combine the features inside of this model and create one molecule that can finally solve this huge problem, which is plagued humanity for a super long time. Another area where this is extremely useful is in particular large graphs, where we can take advantage of the global receptive field of transformer networks, such as in social media graphs, where there are people that have thousands of connections, and those connections themselves have thousands of connections. And so the theoretic motivations have already shown that this is an extremely promising avenue, and the future of transformers for graph representation learning appears to be extremely bright. Thank you.
It's amazing. Good job. You crushed it. So I know what you're all wondering. How do they become this smart? Yeah? So why don't I ask that question first? What is TKS? What is the Knowledge Society? And what were you doing before the Knowledge Society? And how did you become this smart by working with the Knowledge Society? That's the first question. Who wants to go first?
I can jump
Go
in.
for it, Ella. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So we like to describe TKS as a human accelerator for young people. So people aged as 13 to 17 who really want to get involved in the intersecting fields of science, tech, and entrepreneurship. So it focuses on teaching us real-world skills that go beyond what we learned in high school. Even we're learning about mindsets, how to think differently, and how to develop these skills so that they're applicable beyond what we learned in high school. I mean, high school is just, you're learning by the book, you're doing homework, and then calling it a night. But we're learning how to be entrepreneurs and how to solve the world's biggest problems.
It's amazing.
And I think the only thing that I'd add to that is that information has kind of been, it's like democratized and open right now, but there is an art to use the information to your advantage, and how do you frame something to leverage it for yourself and to create an impact in the world, and that's been my takeaway from the program.
Pretty cool.
You're being taught how to teach yourself.
Sorry?
Being taught how to teach yourself.
Being taught how to teach yourself, right? That's
Yeah,
right.
I should point out, in TKS, they don't actually show us themselves everything about AI or everything about quantum. And it's very intentional, because forcing us to actually learn it ourselves is extremely important practice for learning how to solve difficult problems and understand difficult material.
Yeah, that's amazing. The TKS founders, the Nathu brothers, Naveed and Nadim, they always talk about a T. They say that you have to learn the top of the T, which is your explorers, so explore different topics, and then have a focus that you go deep in. So let's talk a little bit about, so you were doing ballet, and then you decided to do TKS.
Yeah.
So maybe talk about how you practice the mindsets, and how did you, and then talk about a brain date, because how many of you know what a brain date is? Do you know what a brain, all the TKS people, of course, put your hands down, non-TKS people. Do you know what a brain date is? All right. So explain to them what a brain date is, and how do you actually practice brain dates? How do you practice mindsets, like growth mindsets, stoicism? Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a brain date is kind of just a little online, usually online, could be in person, but you know, the past 2 years have been kind of crazy. Meet up with a friend, usually someone who you want to have an insightful conversation with. They go beyond just like talking about what the weather's like or what your favorite color is. It's developing these mindsets with another individual who you really want to connect with and grow together.
So what's the, I guess, one brain date, Aryan, you can talk about that was very hard to get, but you got that brain date.
So I had an experience with it's sort of outside TKS where I reached out to someone else, and there's this big entrepreneur who runs this. It's a big company called Upgrad in India, and I was building something in education. I was trying to get a meeting for 3 months. I used to send a cold email every Friday, get a rejection every time, still apply the next Friday. And after those 3 months, it was just persistent hustle. But I got a 30-minute conversation with that person, and that kind of changed the trajectory of the project that I was building. So it's I think it's an art, and it's been very useful for me.
Yeah, it's such an important part, right? Actually cold calling an executive at the age of 15, 16, or 17, it's extremely difficult because that person could have a CEO title, or they could be, chief financial officer, chief data officer, and they'll be like, what do you know? But for you to continue to be persistent and call them is totally different. So it's not just learning about technology, it's also learning about growth mindset, but also called boss mentality, right? So talk a little bit about boss mentality. What is a boss mentality?
Well, boss mentality is basically just exuding lots of confidence in what you do. One of the core principles that we're taught is that if you're trying to do anything that is remotely different or anything that is remotely with the attempt of making an impact on the world, you need to believe in yourself. Because ultimately, when it gets hard and when you don't understand anything and when you're trying to push through huge problems, nothing is going to be there for you except for yourself. And so it's extremely important that boss mentality is developed for sure.
Yeah. So Ella, what's a typical week look like for you, for all of you? What is a typical week? I know you go to school. Outside of school, what else do you do?
Busy, definitely busy. That's how I could describe it. But it's honestly a combination of a bunch of things. Yeah, so school, definitely. I mean, starting TKS, school is kind of like, we're focusing less on that and more so on these real world things that can be more applicable to our future. But definitely school is still important. We get that done. I'm really into working out, going to the gym, so I like to keep me physically well as well. But it's more so a lot of my free time is spent working on these projects and developing all these coding, bettering my projects that I'm really passionate about. It's not the conventional, like, just go to school, come home, call it a night. We're really working towards making ourselves the best version of ourselves. And through TKS, we've kind of found that community. We all really want to develop that, and the future of education lies in this way of learning.
Yeah, so my schedule is a little different than that. After school, I grind, right? I do my research, and then I go to sleep. I have no friends. I don't work out, but I think that's the thing. Like, the reality check is that, like, if you want to do important work, especially with other huge priorities like school, there's just sacrifices you have to make. I'm pretty sure. Like, I could be wrong. I could just be really unproductive.
So you're not on Instagram, TikTok.
No.
Right?
And it's not like these platforms are inherently like worthless. Like, it's good to get dopamine or whatever, right? Like, I don't just like work literally 99% of the time.
I need him to come and give a talk at my household just to get Instagram and TikTok deleted in my household.
Yeah, but I should point out, like, I would never consider myself to be like a super genius. I definitely think that like the drive to work and the drive to work on the problems I'm working on is like just exciting, and that's the reason why I work on it. Not because like I'm able to do that and have like everything that I want in life. That's just.
If you think about this, right, what he just said is what Elon Musk has said, or Mark Zuckerberg has said, or any of the founders. They all say 100-hour work weeks. You got to put 100-hour work weeks to get something right. Malcolm Gladwell said, if you want to be good at something, put in 10,000 hours, right? Just don't say, oh, no one gave me the opportunity. That's called boss mentality, and get it done. So listen, I'm at KPMG. We just announced the metaverse today. How do you learn about the metaverse? I graduated in 1995. I didn't know about metaverse. You're coding in the metaverse. You're actually doing this at this age. So talk a little bit about how do you know about the metaverse so fast?
I can say this for everybody on the panel, but it's like the previous generation grew up on teachers and libraries. We've grown up with like the internet as our greatest teacher, and then programs like TKS, which are like aligning it together so that we can use it to be powerful. I think the biggest advantage that all of us have is just early exposure, and that's how I got into this. I've been passionate about technology, but learning about which spaces actually are growing up, which are going to create the impact in the next 10 years. That's just about getting the right exposure, getting the right mentors, and then using that exposure to start working, because you can learn all that you want about whatever you want to like Google up, learn about it, but you won't be able to understand how it truly works unless you go and start building something or you go and start failing in that industry. And the reason I said failing is because it's inevitable. So if you go in with that attitude where you're going in, it's going to be hard, but if you stick through, you will eventually learn more, and you'll learn more than anybody else has learned just by Googling stuff on the internet. That's how I approach it, and that's how I've gotten.
So not only like 100-hour work weeks, or 100-hour grinding, as you called it, right? Grinding, that's grinding. So remember, 100-hour work weeks, you have to grind in order to become an AI researcher who has raised $1 million already for his venture, right? But then more importantly, also having your boss mentality, because forget like 15, 17 saying this is really cute. We have 225,000 people working at KPMG. We've started hiring 15-year-old TKS students, by the way, as internships. We started this 3 years ago because we want to showcase a lot of the more fixed mindset people to say, hey, here is what growth mindset looks like, and you can get it done. But it's also very important on what future of education needs to look like. So you're disruptors. So a lot of adults in the room may say, oh, you know, we're going to go, this is cute, but this doesn't happen everywhere. So what does the future of education need to look like from your opinion? K to 12, kindergarten to 12.
I think it's very, very simple. Like the school system get implemented right away, right today, which is that I think school teaches you how to grind. Like it teaches you how to work really hard. You get like a ton of like, homework, you get a ton of projects, whatever. But I don't think it teaches you how to think effectively. And like the analogy that I like to give is like, even if you give a computer like 1 billion single-digit addition questions, it will still suffer, it will still take a computationally infeasible amount of time for it to do all those calculations. And I think similarly, in almost every class, whether it's like math or like history, computer science, whatever it is, we're given a lot of homework, but it's like repetition of the exact same stuff that we've already learned. I think there needs to be more focus on less like questions, less problems, like in quantity, and much just harder problems.
And more hands-on, absolutely. It's seeing the difficult thing in school is we can't see it come to fruition in real life. And I think when we begin working on these more technical problems and thinking differently how to solve these really, the world's biggest problems, it's more stepping into the real world. School, it's just writing it down on a paper, but once you can actually see it in real life and see these problems coming to life and the solutions coming to life, that's when the real innovation happens.
That's amazing. So I know we're wrapping up now. Let me just leave you guys with this. As I was meeting with them for an hour before prepping, because I had to prep a lot. Those are my notes, by the way. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm actually, yeah. So I'm grinding for this. He keeps talking about grinding. So here's what I wrote down. I wrote down that you have to learn it, you have to earn it, and you have to return it, right? So the first 20 years of your life, the purpose of your life is to discover your gift. The work of your life is to grind, right, to develop that gift. But then all of them are now returning the gift by making sure that they are, that's the meaning of life. The meaning of your life is to give away your gift. So comfort and growth doesn't coexist. All of them said you have to fail. I think, Aryan, you just said you have to fail many, many times, or you have to fail fast. So I want to thank you all for sharing and prepping, getting your slides. I know it's not easy to do this collision thing, but all of you crushed it. Did they crush it? Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Amazing. Great job. Great job.